Same. All right. Um, so I guess I'll start off with a simple question. First, Don, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'll kind of walk up to my professional career, which you just described my title. I'm a lifelong Boston resident. I have had some short stints living in other places, but grew up just south of Boston. Went to school here in the city itself, and also ended up going to college in the greater Boston metro area, and have spent most of my career working in the charitable space, whether it's with nonprofits doing actual work, working with folks giving money away, or working with charities raising money from wealthy people. Now, in my current role, Daniel, it's interesting. I'll give you a couple of quick depictions of who I am as a person to start. So as a kid, I was the youngest of four, two girls, two boys. I was the youngest. And I did a lot by myself. All right, I was raising myself in many ways. My parents were so busy with four kids, it was hard for them to give same attention to me that they did to my older siblings. And to be honest, I never knew different, never missed it. And to be honest, it's really helped me be much more independent, entrepreneurial, and you'll hear that kind of spell through. I am very fortunate. I have a wonderful family, wife named Ashley, and she works in the government or public consulting space. And then I have two children, a junior in college, Aiden, and then a daughter, Erin, who's a junior in high school and just about to launch her college search process officially, even though we're well underway, as you could guess. At my work, what I do is I actually work with wealthy folks all over the country, based here in the US, in helping them think through how they can take some wealth that they've accumulated through their own personal lives and really make impacts with that. Sometimes that's directly about how they can make an impact for themselves because they have a personal interest. Very often it's about how they can engage their family, teach their children, their grandchildren, and or live out their parents' legacy. And how do they really take what I will tell you is a commitment that virtually every family here in the US with wealth has around supporting charities, whether it's volunteering, doing the work, or giving money, or all three at once.
Great. So I think a lot of students will have the question, what exactly is a donor advised fund?
It's a great question, Daniel. It is one of the best kept secrets in America, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is. Let me give you a couple of statistics to start. First of all, I mentioned the fact that I work with wealthy families in America. As we start, 80% of all American families, 80 to 85% every year, give money away charitably. That's a very important starting point. The wealthy families in America, virtually every one of them gives money away, and very often quite a bit. So there's a lot of intent, there's a lot of interest in it. Donor advised funds are a really special way to help people give their money away charitably, while also getting a maximum tax value for their gifts. So I'm going to give you another stat. There are lots of ways you can give wealth away. Most people give away when they get asked, and they give away cash. A donor advised fund actually allows you to set up a personal charitable account for yourself where you can contribute in appreciated stock. So think of that Google stock that you bought 10 years ago. Its value has gone sky high. You're going to pay taxes when you go to sell that, unless you give it to a donor advised fund. And then you can claim that full value as a deduction against your taxes. And then this account allows you to then have those assets invested over time, no additional taxes. And when you're ready, you can decide which charities, how much, and what causes you want to give away to. So think of it almost like a charitable checkbook, where you can get your tax benefits today. You can fund your giving, and whether that's for the next year or for the next 50 years, really up to your choosing. And so I lead the bank strategy around that strategy and helping clients use donor advised funds to their full effect.
It's really interesting. Really nice how like this, I guess, model helps make such a big impact. And also, um, like kind of just asking if how you got here. Um, I'm curious to know how you found your way to where you are and what philosophy, I guess, guided you.
Yeah, Daniel, I'll tell you something. It's, as I've looked back at my career at different points, one of the most important parts for me, I ended up going off to business school at one point, to the Kellogg School. Great school, loved it, had a great experience there. And I met a lot of people there that had a lot of similarities to me, not necessarily demographically. They didn't necessarily look like me. They didn't act like me. They didn't come from my geography, but there were a lot of similarities. But one of the skills that I noticed virtually every one of them had was the ability to look backward over their lives and tell a straight line story. And yet, as you got to know them, almost nobody's journey was a straight line. There were turns and twists, sometimes opportunistic you took advantage of, other times unexpected hurdles to get past. And so you really saw that that's one of those great skills they taught us at business school, is how to look backward and tell that story. Now, I'm with you, and as you know, I'm a pretty straight talker, so I'm going to share with you my experience. And I think about my career and how it evolved. When I was a kid, I think my first vision of being a professional was to be a physician, a doctor. And I got to college, went in freshman year, went to take all these wonderful courses to set me on that pre-med path. And frankly, most of them were subscribed. I couldn't get in. Got super frustrated, found some other classes and, jumped into them. And at the end of the day, I found on my journey, like the doctor path wasn't really what I wanted. Good news is I didn't go down that path very far. Similarly, my professional career has been a little bit of a mix of opportunism, circumstance, frankly, people that I knew and trusted coming to me with ideas that frankly were probably new for me at the time. And most importantly, I would say the thing that has been the best guide for me, I have never, ever, ever questioned any of my decisions, even looking backward as to whether or not they were kind of true to who I am. And I will tell you, that's probably the most important lesson I carry today. I try to teach to my kids all the time is you've got to be really true to who you are. And that sense of self-awareness is absolutely critical. When you do that, you're going to have a lot of fun. And you're going to find a lot of opportunity in front of you. All of the folks on this call I know are going to be off to tremendously successful lives, including yourself. Just a question of how it turns, right?
Mhm. I really like the idea of like your path not having to be straight. I feel like a lot of um, students or high schoolers feel pressured, especially by like the college admissions process, just the need to have a straight story. You need to tell a perfect story that um, like you're so inspired, even since you were very young, that to get where you are. But I think the reality is that like we are still so young and like things never stop changing. And I think the ability to embrace that things won't be perfect and there is chance involved and there will be twists and turns. I think the ability to embrace them is really good. Speaking of volunteering and philanthropy that you do, oftentimes I hear a reaction which is that I don't have time, I'm not rich, or one day when I make a lot of money, I'll be generous. So you've had experience working with wealthy clients with the resources to serve their communities, but you've
Mhm.
also started volunteering from a young age when like personal resources were limited compared to what you're doing now. So what would you say to people who kind of have this mentality that they can't do it yet or they need to wait until they have the means?
Yeah, Daniel, great question. And I will share with you, I did not come from a family with wealth at all. Not my background. Um, I probably first started volunteering when I was 11 or 12. I know there was a family tradition we had where we had to do certain bits of volunteering around our Easter holiday, which we did. And, at first I will say it was reluctant. As a young kid, I got lots of other things I could do, right? I love basketball, had a lot of friends. School wasn't as stressful at that time of age, but there's just a lot of other things you would choose to do. But what I will share with you is as I've grown older, I found more and more ways to get involved. Sometimes it was prescribed. Your school might require you to do some volunteering, et cetera. I can tell you the learning experiences that I came across every time were absolutely amazing. And I'm going to give you just a couple of quick snippets. As I think about the volunteer opportunities that I have found, and I use that language really specifically, the difference between my mom and my dad telling me what to do versus me deciding where I was going to spend my time, how and with whom, was all the difference for me. So I actually have been very active, even starting in high school, in looking for volunteer opportunities. And I'll give you my first example. I went to Boston College High School, here in Boston, Jesuit high school, and as part of its curriculum, it requires its students in senior year to spend the end of fourth quarter doing volunteer work, significant full-time volunteer work. Sounds simple, great thing to do, except, and you know this well, what happens in spring of senior year? You've got APs. They don't stop, right? So we had to still continue our studies for the APs, also do the volunteering. So I needed to find something very close to school for me. And I ended up finding this wonderful group of nuns that I didn't know. I found them through just a search through some, at the time it was print periodicals, but would be the equivalent of a web search. And they were running a program helping moms that were not married, that were young, they had their kids very young, who were trying to get their high school diplomas. And they wanted to have their kids basically taken care of while they could pursue their studies, because they were the only source to watch kids. So I ended up finding this group, and almost all of these families lived in the projects, public housing, very, very tough situations, domestic violence, drugs, alcohol. And I grew to love the community I found there, even though there were a lot of tough situations. And I'll tell you, that's just one example. That gave me the ability to be fearless, figure out what's important to you, figure out how to help folks in situations that aren't simple. And at the same time, it added a huge amount of impetus for me around how to be an entrepreneur, even though there was no business involved at all. Most of getting through life for a lot of these folks was a very big entrepreneurial challenge. So that's number one. And then the second one I'll give you is, as I grew into being a young adult, even in college, I found my way onto some nonprofit boards, believe it or not. And you might think, gosh, young person, how could you do that? Well, first of all, I found it. So I searched it out. I did my research. I did my homework. I was persistent, found them. And I've spent, gosh, more than 80 years of my life sitting on boards. If you do collective, I'm not that old, as you know. But when you add up all my board services, over 80 years. And what I've tried to do is find boards where two things are possible. Number one, the mission was a direct alignment with that true self I talked about. And number two, the opportunity to make a difference, whether it was the type of organization, the time of life the organization was at, or the issue that they were trying to tackle was super relevant for me. It was really important for me. And I'll give you a small example, and then I'll let you go to the next question. All of you deal with school. So I live in town, this wonderful town called Milton, Massachusetts. We have this great school system. And I was sitting on a school committee meeting, just because that's what I do. And I heard a statistic that blew me away. The required state achievement testing had gone online. And there was a question that came up about the schedule for which classes would be, and which grades would be taking the test at which point. And when you added it up, it took the school system over 4.5 months to deliver the testing because they didn't have enough devices. So one of the things I did is I decided to join the local school education foundation board, became a vice president, and we developed a massive fundraising campaign to introduce digital devices into the school. And it enabled us to do a whole bunch of things, get that testing right, in which our schools are doing great. Second is, can you guess the timing of when that happened, Daniel?
COVID?
2018.
Oh,
So when COVID came, guess who was ready? Town of Milton, right?
yeah.
Didn't lose anything, right? It was amazing. So small situations where I found there was an opportunity for me to have an impact, bigger than just my time and effort. That's where I really have looked, and there are lots of them out there.
Mhm. Really, really shows how much impact that, um, like, I guess, drive, um, to achieve something can do. Um, really impactful. Um, so now I have a very simple, but I guess also tough question. Um, and I think many students and parents also have this unspoken question. Um, this really gets down to the root of what we do. It's why should we volunteer? Should we step in without any selfish goals? So I know, or I have to admit that when I started getting involved with volunteer work, um, I guess a part of it always was that knowing that some senior students or just students need volunteer hours to qualify for certain, I guess, scholarships or National Honor Society, or to look good on their college applications. Um, but I think it's deeper than that. What do you think? Why should we volunteer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think there's an expectation that people should do it, quote
Mm,
unquote, and I get that for sure. I'll just reflect back on my experience. A couple things. Volunteering has paid me back in so many ways more than the time and effort I've invested in it, almost every single time. Um, very, very tangibly, when you think about the benefit or the opportunity, if you embrace it, the ability to take on a level of responsibility far beyond what you would be able to take on in a job is absolutely present. Number two, I also find it's quite a humbling experience. It absolutely teaches folks how to step into the shoes of others and understand their perspective, which may sound simple. I will tell you, it is the skill I see most lacking in applicants for just coming out of college for me. The level of self-awareness is not there. So there's a great ability for you to develop this intuitive sense for how people are actually feeling and thinking, much deeper than you probably understand you could get to. Number two, when you mentioned coming to a selfless perspective, I'll be honest with you, every time I teach classes on volunteerism in different organizations around the country, and I always start by asking who in the room is volunteering for selfish reasons. And nobody's hand goes up, except for mine. And I say, you have to be honest with yourself. When you volunteer, why would you go ahead and do that and continue to do that without any kind of personal fulfillment coming from that? You'd stop. And so I will tell you that all the volunteer experience I've had, they do have a self-fulfilling component, which is absolutely appropriate. But I don't find that there's a selflessness there for me. I think that's something you might see in the press, and that's how people talk about others, et cetera. But ultimately, I do it because it makes me feel great about myself in lots of good ways. And so I would say, I think the benefit of it is the experience, the level of responsibility you can have in general, and frankly, your ability to then galvanize that into relationships. Every nonprofit is governed by a board. You can multiply your connectivity by 10 with every single charity you meet. All the professionals in the fields you want to work on, attorneys, physicians, business folks, they all sit on boards, and it's a great, great, great way to get yourself connected to people. And even if you don't know them, when you get to those interviews and those application opportunities, people are going to recognize the charities that you're working with. They're going to ask you about it,
mhm.
and it's going to make a difference.
So one more question about like volunteering in general. So some students submitted questions asking where they can find impactful volunteer opportunities. And I know you spoke a lot about specific um, boards you sat on or other actions you took with regards to volunteering that had a very big, impactful impact. Um, and this just goes in general, just how to make volunteering more impactful. But I guess also for some people in the process of applying to college, just how the volunteering they do can stand out more or uh, be seen as having more impact. How would you find those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. Simply from a research perspective, if you want to think about any city, any municipality, most towns, there are a couple of organizations that are always kind of in them around the U.S. One is there's almost always a United Way. There is a United Way for your town, whether you know it or not. And the United Way typically is a very big funding conduit. People will give money, and they'll give money out to lots of charitable organizations. You can literally go to their website and look at who they fund, and you'll see all the organization names, et cetera. That's easy. Second, there's also a wonderful set of groups called community foundations, and very often that nomenclature is in their name. So for example, in the Chicago area, there's the Chicago Community Foundation. They do the same kind of funding. The wealthiest families give lots of money to the community foundation. They then distribute out as best as they see to lots of charities. Your foundation may be slightly differently named. In Boston, it's called the Boston Foundation. New York is called the New York Community Trust. Out in Silicon Valley, there's the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, pretty straightforward. But those foundations are great opportunities to just see a landscape of the charities that are out there. And then I think it's about figuring out what are the types of issues that are important to you or you'd like to have an impact in. There'll be some folks like myself, Daniel, I mentioned my high school volunteering. Well, I stayed with that community, South Boston, in college. And I went back and I took that program that we had for tutoring after school, and I turned it into a summer camp. So it gave the moms full-time time to study during the summer. I recruited and hired students from Harvard to come join me. I had to go to the Boston Housing Authority and go get them to give me free housing because we had no place to live and we wanted to be in the community. So we lived in the projects for 3 summers, which a lot of people think is crazy. That may not be for everyone, and I get that. But for me, that's the kind of work I wanted to do. I was really looking at helping the neediest of folks. But there are lots of things you can do. Seniors, my daughter Erin does all kinds of great volunteer work with what are called the ARCs, or it used to be called the Association for Retarded Citizens, but it's folks with disabilities, mental learning issues, mental health issues, et cetera, that are pretty significant, clinical in nature. And it really depends on what you want to do. Others love pets. Some people love the environment. You can find an absolute passion that lines up with yours, and just encourage you to start there, not doing what you think someone else thinks would look good or sounds good. And then, Daniel, the most important thing, if you're passionate and you find that group, you're going to make an impression on that charity. They will write you recommendation letters. They will introduce you to people proactively. They are the most valuable outcome of that experience. You can put on paper what you did, how many hours, how long you spent. For somebody who's in a leadership position to write a letter on your behalf, explaining what a difference you've made in the lives of their clients, absolutely off the charts value.
Yeah, I think it's really important that people understand that you should be doing what you're passionate about, and that you should be doing what makes you happy and what you feel like has the greatest impact on issues that are important to you. Um, like in the end, the colleges are other people making a judgment about you, but in the end, this is your life. And I think it's important just in general to live your life for yourself and not try to fulfill someone else's expectations for you. So now I'm going to move on to talking about college. I thought I could escape college after the admissions process, but I guess I'm back here now. Um, so I know some of my peers are still in that journey. Um, so here are just some quick questions submitted about just the college process, applications, all that. So can you tell us about your college experience, where you went to school, and how you chose your major in college?
Yeah, sure. So I did go to Harvard undergrad, and it's interesting. I got into school, didn't really think a ton about it. It was close enough to home. It was an urban school, important to me. It was accessible to my house by public transit. Took about 45 minutes to get home if I needed to go or wanted to go. And of course, it had a great reputation. Hard to say no to Harvard, right? So I got there. I told you I was going to be a doctor. Learned that that wasn't going to happen pretty quickly, and just from my own fulfillment perspective. And I ended up finding a course on the Irish language, which I decided to take. And of course, everybody still to this day tells me I was crazy to do it, all that. Well, in high school, I actually was trying to take bio and chem AP, and the lab periods conflicted. So I wasn't able to take both. So I had a gap in my schedule, and I ended up taking a class on Irish history and literature and the parallelism between the two. And it just was, I loved the class. So I got to Harvard when I found a gap in my schedule. I was like, well, let me try the Irish language. If any of you know Irish, it is an incredibly hard language. Think of it almost like a German or Russian type of sound, total different pronunciation, language totally different, etc. But I took that class, fell in love with that, and I ended up becoming a Celtic Studies major. Now, 2 things. None of you have ever met a Celtic Studies major and never will again except for me. And I'm going to explain why. Because there are not undergraduate Celtic departments. So I was at Harvard, I found my passion, I looked across the academic spectrum, and guess what? There was no department. But there was a graduate department. So I went and I petitioned to the university with sponsorship from the department to create a special major just for me that I could have and own. And I ended up, and I am a very proud Celtic Studies graduate today. Does it affect what I do for work? Not tangibly. I learned how to learn. It's really what I think of from a liberal arts perspective as much as anything, and wouldn't trade it for anything. It allowed me to go over and study in Ireland. I got to study there for 9 months, had a wonderful time, and at the same time taught me the rigors of graduate level classes. I was taking graduate level classes in addition to some undergrad classes, but just a lot of fun, got to meet some very world-class professors. We had people traipsing through Harvard that were the only Celtic experts in the world. And of course, they would meet me and they're thinking, what are you doing here? It's like, well, I'm an undergrad, I'm a Celtic studies major. And they sit and spend time. I had the chance to meet the most famous early Welsh Celtologist, who gave me an independent study experience that was the best I've ever had, just because he saw my interest and wanted to help me fulfill that passion.
Yeah, can really see how passion and drive, determination can get you far. Just self-advocacy. I think can tell that's very important. One more question about college. If you could talk to a younger version of yourself back in college, what advice would you have?
Probably a couple things. Number one, college is an amazing experience. And one of the biggest benefits, I learned this at business school, the people you meet there are so critically important, or could be. My best friends are still college buddies. I still have a 30-person Zoom call I put on quarterly for my college friends today. It's awesome. And I will say that you can get wrapped up in your own stuff at college and really get so focused and stressed out about what you have to do. You miss a little bit of who you're doing it with and what's important. So I would just ask folks to make sure you're building your college experience to be a balanced one, where you want to have your goals and your pursuits. You absolutely want to walk out with some real relationships and find those people. You have some amazing talent there. Danny, you're going to find this when you hit college next fall. You're never going to meet that level of quality of people across the board in any other place again. So take full advantage. Make sure you have that opportunity to really take stock of folks. I'm going to assume everybody on this call's already got their drive, ambition, all that. That's great. And it would just, again, be true to yourself and don't lose sight of the people around you, because they are so much in a part of the experience. You probably won't realize that till you're done.
Great. So it might sound a little early to talk about professional career development for today's audience, um, but I've always heard that it's never too early to develop the skills that are essential in the future. So what do you think are some of the most important skills or qualities you would expect a future young employee or just a person in general to start developing right now?
Yeah, Daniel, I'll hit on a couple that I mentioned earlier just to start, and then I'll go further. The first one I would argue is self-awareness, and I would continue to challenge yourself. If you think you are incredibly self-aware, find opportunities to put yourself in awkward situations and find out if it's true. Right? Not comfortable situations to see if you can really intuit and step into people's shoes and whatnot. That's a really critical life skill I found. I always like to tell folks, Daniel, when people say, 2 best jobs that you've ever had: running a summer camp, where I got to see kids and social behavior and dynamics like you can't imagine. And also, I used to bartend I bartended my way through college, make money. I got to understand and learn people and see their behavior from their actions, their tone, their dress, everything. So valuable to me. That self-awareness, critical skill. Second is your own drive and ambition. There are going to be times in life when things come to you, and that's fine. But the minute you start to expect them or you stop seeking them out, you're going to be limiting your choices and your universe. And I would just encourage you to always be challenging yourself, to ask yourself, am I doing the things and pursuing the pursuits that really resonate for me? Whether it's volunteer, professional, social, etc. And then the last skill that I would offer for folks is, I see this a lot of times with recent college graduates, where you may have incredibly bright people, maybe even be incredibly self-aware, but there's a level of work that they are not willing to do, or don't understand, or don't think is important to understand. I would tell you, the more you can commit yourself to doing, whether it's digging your hands in the soil, it's building spreadsheets, whatever base level work might be required to see a process from beginning to end, That willingness and understanding of the work, commitment, and effort to get to an outcome is critical, because a lot of folks don't understand how to then get to outcomes, because they only envision, you just need to have a smart answer. How do we solve poverty in the world? Well, let's give people money. Great idea. How's it going to get done? Who's going to do it? How do you get started? All that. So I would just encourage you to really think about that as something that I see many schools and preparations for people for school is to let you think that you're at a level of elitism. You don't need to do certain things or think about things. I would just ask you to challenge that for yourself. And in my own life, I will do things at the very base level here at work. I will sit with the people doing the work that I'm going to go improve, for me to be able to understand what they're doing and how their pains are, to then go solve their problems. And that's frankly how we launched our donor advised fund program, is really understanding how people were feeling constrained in their ability to give money away and have it be meaningful.
Great. And then this is one last question, but I think this is really important to kind of bring everything we've said today together, which is you've lived or you have a very impactful job. As we've heard, you've done a lot of very um, important and very impactful things in your life. Um, and I've heard that life in college will be very busy, and there must have been a lot of um, tasks you've had to juggle in your life. So I was hoping to ask how you find balance between all the various things you do right now, and maybe how you did that back in college even as well, because I know that'll be an
Yeah,
important skill.
yeah, great question. So there are a couple things. There are definitely times in my life I probably bit off more than I could handle at one time. And there are times I probably wasn't as busy as I needed to be. In finding that balance, it is a learning experience. I would encourage you not to be too critical if you're finding yourself in that spot. But generally speaking, a couple thoughts. When I was in college, I was an athlete too. I played rugby, and I rode crew and before I became a rugby player. So I had studies, I had volunteer programs I was running, I was bartending, I was actually an athlete with practice every day. There was a lot going on, but it's all manageable. I think for me, the perspective is always, you're doing these things because they're important to you. You should challenge yourself to think about, where do you need to have perfection on everything you're doing? And I half joke, when everybody I'm working with is a little bit upset with me, I'm probably doing just great, right? Because it means I'm not spending too much time in any one place, if you will. And I think college is very similar. The other thing I would share with you is, I've been very fortunate as the youngest of four, and a self-doer. I have an inherent sense of optimism, the belief of things are possible, no matter what. And I would ask you to continue to put that on yourselves. You all have more capabilities inside of yourself to both know when you're crossing a line and taking on too much, but also knowing that things can be done, and not letting others tell you what can't be done or what's most important, or stop spending time there or that. You're your own best compass. And I would just encourage you, like, to make sure that sense of optimism that's in all of you becomes a real guiding force, as opposed to it comes out now and again when things are easy, which is how it works for a lot of people. One small example, when I was in college, I had a roommate who was a track athlete, and I had 5 roommates. One of the 5 was a track athlete, and he was gonna get as high a grade point as he could. That was his goal, and he did. And he missed out on a lot of stuff, which he's not regretful of it. That's what he was after. It's what he wanted. Those of us in the rooming group, he missed a lot of the social stuff we did. He missed out on a lot of the people that I talked about. And he also ended up constraining himself academically into a very narrow path. So his breadth of study really wasn't as robust and diverse as a liberal arts education, in my opinion, really can and should be. But I'll stop there. I won't moralize, because I just told you it's all about you guys to decide.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really important skill that like you should cultivate. I think there's always room for improvement, but it will help us go far. Um, that concludes my questions for today, but don't leave yet. We still have a open Q&A at the end. Um, but now I'll pass on the baton to um, Lily, the youth advisor, to talk a little bit about the parent side of things.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And hi, Don. Um, don't mean to put you on your spot, but I was going to ask you one more question to follow up on that. I sat through a full day today training of youth mental health, first aid training, learning some skills. Oddly, one of the most important skills of being a mental health first aid is actually understand the concept of self-care, finding something that it's unique or for myself and keep myself motivated, keep myself squared and happy. Prioritize that. I know you've been doing something. Do you mind to share with the audiences here?
No, happy to. And Lily, I'll give you a little background. I don't know if I told you this. By the way, I'm here because of Lily and Daniel's invitation, so I'm grateful to you both to start. You know, you all probably remember there was in an episode of Minnesota where a black man was killed by a police officer, George Floyd. And I remember being really, really frustrated for all of the social context around that, both Mr. Floyd and his history, the police response, all kinds of stuff. And I decided one day to go for a run. And I do a lot of running, little bits, maybe 3, 6 miles. I did run a marathon once, really excited about that, but hadn't done it in a long time. And I decided to go running in this nearby reserve, this woodland that's near my house, which I hadn't done. And I basically went for this crazy long, like 10-mile run and was dead at the end of it. But as Lily knows, I found such a settlement that run gave me that I basically started doing it. So once a week, Lily, it'll be tomorrow morning if you guys want to join. I go out into the woods, this wonderful place called the Blue Hills, and I will run between 10 and 15 miles. I'm not necessarily super fast, lots of hills, rocky terrain, all kinds of fun stuff to do, wildlife that you'll get to see on occasion. And it's really just been such a great settling point for me, and it leads me into the work week really with kind of a fresh slate every single weekend.
And Don, you know how grateful I am that and drag you here on a weekend. And I really need to share with this audience is how I was able to get you here. I wasn't I do work in the same company as Don, but I wasn't an old-time friend with Don. I only know him last year. I was happily involved with Asian Leadership Network in our company, and we do professional development events sometimes, and Don was one of our guests. And he shared some of his, career development, similar things he shared with you today, and it was strongly resonated with me. And I asked him a question saying, I advise a youth group at our local language school, and sometimes I feel that it's hard to motivate my kids to really take initiatives and do things. What are some advice you can give it to me and how to help them? And Don gave me a simple answer. You can invite me to go talk to them. And imagine, I was like, wow. But that speaks what kind of person Don is. He is just fabulous. You are a fabulous person. All right. So I also wanted to respect time and open the floor to everyone at the end for some of the questions that directly the audiences can ask. So even though, Don, I do want to have a long conversation with you, which we will do that maybe next week. But today I'm going to cut down just 3 critical questions. I think it comes to my mind a lot recently. The fact is that it's not easy to be a parent today. When Daniel mentioned about the stress he's experiencing, parents have a lot of anxieties too. There's a lot of expectations of how to be a parent. On the one hand, you wanted to give kids all the freedom and independence, but on the other hand, you just can't help. What if they fail? What if what if I make them miss that opportunity that they shouldn't? There's just a lot of questions, a lot of confusions. So one of the common things I often heard from the parents near me is that we are always being very supportive. We encourage our kids to make their own decisions, and we praise for everything they do, but they're still not self-motivated. Why? Is this can change? What do you think?
I think it's a couple things. Lily, I think first of all, many people probably forget what they were like at that same stage of life. And they overestimate how much of a go-getter they were at the time. And number two, it really is born out of a desire for those kids to have a perfect life, right? And when you think about that, that's not a bad instinct. However, some of the stories that I see, particularly with very big families of wealth, is one of the things that can go awry is when the parents have the means and the will to make that life perfect, giving people resources, things like that, it doesn't necessarily help them. It actually very often can hinder them. So I think what I share with parents is, this is my own and my wife's parenting philosophy. We found it was very important to try to figure out when it was time to start letting your child make their own decisions and be content to like button your mouth and just live with it, right? And when we think of that perfect life, your perfect life is probably different than mine. And for us to worry about prescribing it in such a way for your child, most parents tend to go past the age where they should start letting those kids make those decisions. And Lily, I'm going to tell you what's a heartbreaking story for me. I shared this with you, I believe, in the past, but a good friend of mine leads the admissions office at a major Ivy League university. And when my son Aiden was looking at school, I called him up and said, listen, we're not going to apply to your school, but I'd love to get your feedback as a dad to understand what are the mistakes you see parents make in going through this process with their kids. And he gave me a really quick and simple answer, which was, and to think of the school he's representing, this is a major Ivy League university. He said the biggest mistake I see parents make is they visibly show disappointment at the school their child chooses. And it just resonated with me that we have to be content as parents that our job has been to raise kids to make good decisions for themselves and let them live with those decisions. Are they all going to be perfect? No. Were all of my decisions perfect? No. Again, I can look backward and draw you a straight, perfect line, but it didn't go that way, right? And it went side to side and sometimes backwards, sometimes forward faster than you thought. Who knows? But that's the guidance I would probably give, is worry less about the decisions and preparing your kids to be able to make the decisions, and then really fighting your hardest to step back and just let that be their process, not that be your process.
Yeah, and then there's a big, like, a part of it that I heard is that it's their life you want them to live, and not the life that we want them to live. And as scary as it is, but they need to figure out what is their life go, and how do they want to enjoy the life. And then speak another side is really success, as you said, your path is not linear, and then success is not one dimension either. How would you define success for your child?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think about this a lot for myself, and I hear this from my sisters. They'll often kind of point at me and they're like, "Hey, you just did that. You didn't ask us or think about us or whatever." I said, "Well, no. Very often, what I think about is, am I doing things for the right reason? Sometimes that's what makes me happy. Other times, it's really what's the right thing to do for the group." And I will tell you, like, that kind of empowerment, self-empowerment, and self-belief, when you can sit and be really happy and look backward at things you've done and decisions you've made and not have regrets, almost doesn't matter how they turned out. It does, but generally speaking, having the ability to have that level of comfort and confidence that you're driving your own decisions for the right reasons has always been what's been most helpful to me. It doesn't always turn out again the way you expect, but I will say, big picture, every time I have found that you put in the time and the effort, the thought, and you make decisions, and it doesn't just mean instant decisions. Usually these are longevity issues. You're going to find that you're in a good place and you're self-satisfied for a good reason, because you were being true to yourself, right? Anyway, that's kind of our starting point as parents, is hoping that they're going to be happy at the end of the day.
Yes, totally. And be true to yourself. It's very important in today's environment where there's really, a lot of emphasis on a single dimension of meritocracy, and then a lot of expectations, and even a lot of competitions. And what are some of the, I would say, tips or practices you would recommend to the parents on the panel today, that how do we help the kids navigate through this environment, help them to thrive, despite of all the stresses?
Yeah, I would think, you want, ideally for the, excuse me, the longevity of your relationship with your kids, I would think that if I asked parents, any parent, Would you rather have your kid not have a good relationship with you, but they've got the perfect life because you pushed them towards it? Or would you rather have a good relationship with your child and their life will be what it becomes? Most of them are going to want to have a relationship with their kids and frankly their grandkids. And I will tell you, the ability to allow your kids to have you as a safe haven, an open book, a non-judgmental resource, they can come to just vent sometimes. They give guidance and advice, but also know when not to. And Lily, I'll say the other most important thing that I think I've learned pretty quickly. I used to coach baseball, and I learned this lesson very early in sports. Have other coaches with you, and you never coach your own kid. You can do that at home, but in the team setting, you let the other coaches coach your kid, and you do the same for their kid. And what I found is that became very critical to helping identify other mentors who could speak to your son, my son, without sounding like a dad. It's someone else. And so that leverage, that experience that you might want to convey isn't always best coming from you for a lot of reasons. Be smart enough to realize when you've got those 30 college buddies I've introduced Aiden to all of them, right? He may connect with them forever. He may just stay close to a few, but they all know each other and they will teach him things that I probably have tried to teach him that just won't sink in because I'm his dad.
Yeah, one of the things I recently heard from a parent panel from my younger one's school, the counselors suggested to all the parents that although it's very hard to resist that urge, but do not get engaged with the game of comparison. And that really struck me, especially like when you have kids in the sports or in, say, math competition, any sort of competition. And this is even my son said to me, like, if I don't want to be competitive and win against the others, why would I even get into competitive sports? So it's a really hard thing, but it's really different. Being competitive is very different from like putting all the emphasis on the outcome and then bring the judgment or emotions on the outcome where inevitably affect how child feel their relationship with you or relationship with their teammates. So very good takeaway. Do not get into the game of comparison. All right, so I'm going to be conscious of the time and stop asking questions since we started 5 minutes late. So we'll give another few more minutes. So we'll end 8:05 and we'll respect everyone's time and including yours. So now I'm going to pass back to Daniel. And Daniel, you can check whether there's any questions on the chat box. And also, if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and then speak up. You should be able to unmute yourself directly.
All right. I saw that Jing asked a question a while ago in the chat. I'll just ask their question first. And their question is, how can parents encourage volunteering?
I'm sorry, how can parents encourage volunteering?
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, it's a great question. So one of the things that's often hard is for a parent to put expectations of volunteering when they don't do any themselves. So you could have a parent like me that does active volunteering and it's easy to point and find it. The second is do it with your child. My daughter Erin, I mentioned, does work with folks with disabilities. She does it alongside my wife. That's one of my wife's professional areas of focus. And they love going out to the arcs and doing work with all of the different families and the very often aging adults that are living in these group houses that they support. So I would say both. The other option is to also think about how they can find group settings or a dynamic where it's not just one person trying to find one organization to do one thing. What about a group of 20 peers, right? Or social peers? Or is there a group they've always kind of wanted to get connected to but didn't know how? Can you be the linchpin to make that happen?
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Anyone just want to raise their hand, directly ask, or you can leave it in the chat as well.
Hey, Daniel, if there are no questions, I'm happy to answer the question I would ask about the bank and how we hire people coming out of college. Would that be of interest?
Oh, Oh, I see one more question. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah. So, someone asked, what would be a volunteer opportunity for a rising eighth grader? I think
A
like,
rising eighth grade.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
maybe like for a younger student.
Yeah, so for a younger student, I would think about a couple things. You're probably going to want something that absolutely has adult supervision, typically, right? Again, that may be a great opportunity to do volunteering alongside a parent. But then you could also think about there are lots of different projects that could be one time even, whether it's constructing care packages for families in need, or putting together a backpack for homeless families as they're transitioning to a new home. So there are lots of ways you could do a one-time type of thing. There are also great things you could do around town. I was, Lily, doing my run up the Blue Hill the other day, and I came across this cavalcade of Curry College students coming down the hill, all with trash bags. They did this massive cleanup. You could easily go to a park or anywhere and launch something like that. You could also do like a can drive or recycling drive. There are lots of ways that you could get younger children involved. Again, partly figuring out what issues are important to them. There are lots of issues related to animals that would be tremendous for young folks as well. Shelters and all kinds of programs. There are programs that they take pets and bring them in to see seniors at a house bath. As just a way to give them some comfort, some joy in their lives, et cetera. So I would just encourage, again, same idea, find the issues that you're passionate about, make sure there's an adult construct to it. And again, if the parent's willing to be there, great. And then also think about, be the entrepreneur. Go launch a Clean Up Your Town campaign, right?
Yeah. So yeah, starting small, working your way up, and that's just finding things that are both age appropriate and also something you're passionate about. We still have 2 minutes, and I don't see any questions or raised hands. So I think we can quickly talk about what you mentioned earlier.
The bank, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about Bank of America. When we look to hire students, believe it or not, the bank starts its process freshman summer. So we have summer internships, and it's a program where the goal is really to hire in freshmen who have the intent, without a commitment, but the intent to stay with the bank and come back sophomore summer, junior summer, senior summer. And then we have a program where folks who have matriculated through that process graduate into an offer to come for a full-time job. So they walk out of senior summer having a job offer, and it's into something called our analyst program. And the analyst program then will give you the chance to participate in 3 different 6-month cycles inside the bank with different parts of the bank to understand the different nature of the work that we do and hopefully find a home for you, et cetera. And I mentioned this because it's a pretty unique opportunity, a little bit like a liberal arts program where you have the ability to dip your toe in. And first of all, super attractive because people are like, gosh, if I get into freshman, I like it. I have an internship for 4 summers, home run. But it also gives you the chance to really go deep, see what the people are like, understand the work. We have been the rotation for 3 analysts, all of whom knew nothing about donor advised funds, knew nothing about charitable giving, wouldn't believe the bank would be doing this kind of stuff, and are now part of my team. They loved it, right? So I will just share with you, there are lots of ways to get involved and engaged. Just think about where you might want to get your feet wet, realizing getting started even in that first summer. This is not a pressure comment. This is more of an opportunity. You can go pursue opportunities like that without really knowing exactly what you want to do or exactly where you want to be, et cetera.
That's great. So I think we're all out of time, and I don't see any last minute questions. So I guess we'll wrap it up. Thank you everyone for participating. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of your weekend, and stay tuned for more learning and networking opportunities from the National Youth Leader Council. Goodbye, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
Dan, and good night, everyone. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah, good night.
And Daniel, you did a great job.
Wow. Thank you so much.